disparity that leaves millions struggling for economic security. Economic oppression is not only a violation of fundamental human rights, it is also a blow to democracy. When economic power is concentrated in the hands of a few, and when corporations are awarded the same status as actual human beings, the democratic process is fundamentally compromised, end quote. UUA President Peter Morales, in his public statement last October on the Occupy movement, said, "For too long we have seen attention paid to banks that are too big to fail, while the plight of the poor and the working class go unaddressed. For too long we have been pitted against each other by those in power, by a corrupt economic system that pushed us to consume more and more and to get ours at any cost." I quote, "I reach out to Unitarian Universalists everywhere," Reverend Morales said, "to consider how you might be of service to any among us who are struggling to provide for their families, those who have been cheated and abused by financial institutions, and all those whose backs ache under a burden of debt, unemployment, and fading hope. Let the world see the power of our faith in action."
Our speaker today, MarydeCamp, has taught at 5 colleges and universities. She is part of the Occupy movement in Tucson and has camped out in 4 different parks. She has had 37 tickets against her, with 22 remaining. She was a Green Party candidate for mayor and ran for the Ward 3 City Council. We're looking forward to hearing MarydeCamp. I'm very tall.
Good morning, and thank you so much for inviting me here today. It's a beautiful facility, it's wonderful people, and the music has been outstanding. Thank you. As Patty mentioned, I was an instructor, and it's an honor to return to a classroom setting. And because I am an instructor, I'll give you a little bit about my outline. I want to talk about my background, current state of affairs, and Occupy Tucson. I'll begin with my background. Now, the talk this morning, as indicated in the bulletin, is what do we really mean by democracy? And I thought, on Mother's Day. And I'm an odd choice because my own mother's passed along, and I've never been brave enough to be a mother myself, yet here I am. And I thought, but wait, we all share the same mother, our Mother Earth. And as far as father, our song earlier pointed to the division of labor along gender lines. But if we look back, whether we're evolutionists or creationist, somewhere back in our history, in our DNA, we share that initial spark of life. We are connected. We are all one. So that gave me the courage to go forward with talking about democracy. My personal background, much like Patty's ancestry, is steeped in hard physical labor starting early. I grew up in Nebraska, and if you know your American history, you'll know that that was a homesteader state. The conditions were so challenging there that the government actually had to give land to people to entice them to stay and put down roots. This wasn't so far in our history. This was when covered wagons were crossing the prairie. And we learned there in the heartland about the true value of connection, of being good neighbors, of working together. Now, my own people were very poor and ignorant folks. Bless their hearts, good-hearted people, but not very well educated. And in fact, my grandfather, when they started imposing taxes on land, would not stand for that. He sold his land, thereby depriving his offspring of any future capital. But that was all right. I was born into a democracy. I was born into a meritocracy. I was led to believe that you weren't judged on your bloodline. You were judged with what you could bring to the table. And that if you worked hard and you kept your nose clean, kept out of trouble, and that if you got an education, the sky was the limit. You could go anywhere, you could be anything. And I was young and gullible and took it to heart. I've worked since I was 12 or 13. I've been a candy striper in a nursing home, a waitress, a car hop, detasseled corn. I served as a gift wrapper in a department store. I was a federal bureaucrat for an agricultural program in Nebraska. I taught at different colleges and universities. So yes, I worked hard. I had a solid work history, but I never earned very much money. I never got above $30,000. Never even touched $30,000 a year, which is about the median income in America. But I kept my nose clean. I kept out of trouble. I had no run-ins with the law other than maybe a parking ticket or a speeding ticket, but nothing that would cause anybody concern. I volunteered regularly. I went to church. I was a member of my community. And as far as educated, well, I got a bachelor's degree, I got a master's degree, and I was in 2 doctoral programs and got to the all-but dissertation stage. So very well educated. And then along came politics. With this tremendous education, I started thinking, what's happening to my world? I read about 350.org and climate change. I read about peak oil, how we as human beings have extracted over half the petroleum reserves from our planet already. Our appetite is ever increasing, but we don't have more reserves to turn to. This constant churning out of pollution since the industrial age has changed our climate. We're having much more intense weather than we ever used to. And I saw faltering economies around the world. And I thought, oh my goodness, what do? I'm a person of action. I want to be responsible and do my part. And this is a democracy. I can run for office. So in 2009, I ran in the Ward 3 City Council race on the Green Party ticket. And I got 6% of the vote, which was pretty good, considering I was not a Democrat or Republican. And then last year, since we hadn't solved peak oil, climate change, and crashing economies, I stepped up again to run for mayor. What I see happening is a swing in our country to the right, to a devotion to consumerism and competition. We judge people's value and their worth by what they own and what they can control. the best use for our human energy. Somewhere along the line, we were fed a story that the highest and best use would be to jump on that corporate treadmill and churn out profits for our employer. That hasn't worked very well. As Patty mentioned earlier, we have the largest economic divide than we've seen previously. Lila told us what we're facing as far as economic injustice. It's not a comfortable position to be in. We have the American Legislative Exchange Council, who are proposing model legislation that is then carried to the state legislatures. Things that contradict the majority's wishes. We have a restriction on gay rights. We have more and more oversight into what can be taught in the public schools. We have consolidation in the mainstream media. When Occupy came along, I was hugely relieved. I thought, finally, here's a group of people who believe like I believe, who care about the same things that I care about, and who are not shackled by our current political system. You don't have to be a Democrat or a Republican to succeed. This was right at the beginning of my mayoral run. I started camping on October 15th. And what I found, even though I had qualified, even though I have a great education and I've studied political science and economics and communication and business, I was not deemed qualified by the media. What I found was our own Arizona Daily Star set up separate interviews for me, the female Green candidate, and for the two male Republican and Democrat candidates. At the Tucson Weekly, they had their campaign edition, and the two men were prominently featured on the front page. I had to switch to the back page to even learn that I was in the race. Stations misspelled my name, didn't show up for my press conferences, and painted me as a scofflaw and a ne'er-do-well because I had faced an eviction. My home had been foreclosed. I was underwater on my payments following a bicycle accident that landed me in the emergency room. And I thought, if I am so mistreated by my society, I don't have material wealth, you've taken my house, and you still want me to pay for this education that can't get me a job. And I'm not alone in this. Several people share my story, feel that they haven't had an even playing field or fair treatment in our system. So, that brought me to Occupy Tucson. I've already covered my background. I talked about the current state of affairs. Now I want to tell you a little bit about Occupy Tucson, about who we are and what we're doing. We're a nonpartisan group. We are a laboratory for democracy. We are an open system where everyone's voice can be heard. We're trying to change the language. Instead of being homeless, I consider myself home free. Instead of being a leaderless movement, we are a leaderful movement. I'm just one face. A number of others could be here speaking to you today, sharing similar points with you. So here deaths, to Veterans for Peace, to Code Pink Women for Peace. And what we've done is band together in various working groups to come up with practical, doable, cheap alternatives to the status quo. And I'm here today to offer an invitation to each of you to become involved. You don't have to sleep in a tent and get citations in order to be an occupier. But I am asking you to step up your democratic responsibilities. I'm asking you to be involved, if not in Occupy, then in other peace and social justice groups. Tucson is a wealth of social activism, and there are many people out there who share your ideas, but we've been trained to isolate, atomize, and disconnect from our neighbor, when our true strength and our true fortune is in shared human connections. So today, after the service, we've got some literature and handouts over in the undercloth. If you can't stick around, you can visit us online at occupytucson.org and learn more about the movement, about how you can become involved. If you're like me, a little bit old school and like the face-to-face connection, you can do that as well. We now have office space in the historic quad at 738 North 5th Avenue. We're at the south end of the building on the second floor in room 202. You're all invited to come by. You're all invited to offer support. Of course, you can donate online. You can send contributions in. But it's not your money we want as much as we want your minds and your hearts. This Mother's Day, I wish that we would all find the love that we were born into, the arms of our mothers, and if our own physical flesh and blood mothers have passed, we still share Mother Earth.